So, I'm here today to have a ramble about the Fallout fandom's favourite furry femboy, the fearless Vulpes Inculta, as I think Ilario calls him, or somebody calls him that at some point. Because Vulpes is a very strange character. He's someone that doesn't really get a lot of play in the game, to the point where I think a lot of his dialogue is bugged from what I remember, but I think me and a lot of other people in the fandom find this character really weirdly interesting because, in case you're watching a rambling New Vegas video but don't know a lot about New Vegas, the issue with New Vegas is that a lot of the content is very heavily weighted to the NCR side, so a lot of these ideas and concepts that go into the Legion are sort of brought up and not really developed on too much. I think there are a few Legion towns that they wanted to have included. I think it's Camp Willow that it's in, like, they wanted to make it as part of the game, but just they ran out of time. Like, an idea that they bring up in the base game is that, like, Legion territory is really safe for traders, and there's very few issues with raiders, or gangs like that. And it's an interesting idea, but the way, because they've got such a limited scope, the way they show this is there's just a random Legion trader just kind of hanging out in the fort, and he goes, oh yeah, the Legion, oh fucking, I know they do slavery and everything, it's great, but you know, my training's great. I don't even need to have guards with me because the Legion, they murder all the raiders. Which is a super interesting idea, and it would have been lovely to find that out organically. However, because of the game's scope, they had to have basically the guy advertising it in the fort saying, by the way, the Legion do good things, I swear, we're not just all, you know, murdering monsters. And I wouldn't call a lot of this necessarily a flaw with the game. I just think a lot of the ideas ended up on the cutting room floor because they had such a limited time frame to make the game. But Vulpes is kind of a victim of this because he's such a distinct character, but because of all the limitations they had, he kind of just gets stapled to one spot on the floor in the fort, and he doesn't move much beyond there, because he's referenced all over the game. Obviously, there's all the backstory, the stuff with Nipton. I think he's referenced somewhere in Camp Searchlight too, and if you don't nuke him, right when you meet him at Nipton, like most of the community seems to, he does come up and give you the marker Caesar on the strip. So he gets around, but I think just because of how distinct and memorable I feel like he is, I feel he doesn't quite get the play I feel like he deserves. Because the weirdest thing about him is, I feel like he gets one of the most unique character introductions of any villain in all of Fallout. I'm trying to think of a second villain that leaves like a bigger impression on you the second you see them. The only one I can think has a more distinct introduction would be the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Horrigan himself. But I'm going to be honest, if you're second place to Frank Horrigan, I think you're doing something really well at that point, because there is no standing up to that guy. But yeah, I really love the way he's introduced, because you spend all of the first hour or two of the game fighting powder gangers. You really think these guys are assholes. They're not super tough, but they cause problems, and you sort of think, wow, these guys are pricks. And then you walk into Nipton, everything's on fire, and he's fucking crucified like 8 of them, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? It looks like they've done their own little personal holocaust, they've mowed down the whole town, and there are just these, like, I think there's, like 7 of them, 7 of these fuckers in red stood up, and there's a big furry, leading the pack. That was unintentional, but yes, I am laughing at my own joke. Because although everyone calls him a furry, everyone makes the same joke, including me. You know, that dog head is quite distinct. I think the only people that wear those dog heads besides him are the Legion Explorers. So, despite it being weird and us making the obvious jokes that we're gonna make, it does make him stand out quite significantly. But another thing I think is weirdly distinct about him is his voice, because I don't think that voice actor, I don't know which voice actor voices him, but whoever does that, they do that voice for him and him exclusively, which is always a weird thing in New Vegas, because if someone's got a unique voice, that means they are special in some way. Because you've got like Liam O'Brien and Yuri Lowenthal doing like most of the random NPCs. So every random person in the background does, like, they've all got the same voice, essentially. So to hear the Vulpes be doing his little Shigaraki impression, going like, I murdered the town. He's not quite that raspy, but you know what I mean. Side tangent, someone in my comments said that voice is sexy, and that they sided with the Legion entirely because of how sexy his voice was. Now, I'm not one to judge, but, you know, I enslaved the entire Mojave because I was just that down bad for furry boy over there, is quite the statement to be making, all I'm saying. Someone on one of my TikTok videos about him described feeding him a 40mm grenade, and that just lives rent-free in my head from this point onwards. But also, second tangent I'm gonna go on here, within a tangent, apparently his voice lines there are bugged when he introduces himself. He's supposed to give you a speech about who he is, give his name, and be like, oh, I am the Legion, blah, 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 I do this, that, and the other. But apparently the lines are coded incorrectly, so he'll jump straight into a spiel about what he did. There is a way to trigger it in-game by completely avoiding Nipton, getting the mark of Caesar early, and then going back, and then he'll give his speech as to who he is, and he'll even toss in a little line like, oh, hey, I met you earlier. I didn't have a dog head on me back then, though. But although I think it's weird to call his voice sexy, I will heavily praise the voice actor who does Vulpes' lines, because the thing I find most fascinating about him is the way the voice actor delivers a lot of his lines. He can sort of switch off and on the scariness of him, which I find kind of interesting, because when you meet him in Nipton, he's in full, like, I'm in, like, atrocity mode. I've got to seem scary, I've got to seem spooky. And obviously, Vulpes himself, you know, little femboy, he's not intimidating on his own. It's more the idea that he has the capacity to create these sorts of, you know, what's the word he uses? Dramatic, I think Caesar calls them theatrical atrocities, which would be the most Caesar thing I've ever heard, but there isn't enough pseudo-intellectual, like, techno-babble in there, so it's not exactly. But when you meet Vulpes in different contexts, I like how the voice actor's able to sort of make him appear more chill or, like, low down, or even make him appear scared, because I made a video about this yonks ago, but, like, if Legate Lanius takes over the Legion, Vulpes is all like, oh, geez, I don't think Lanius is going to want me around anymore. I like the way the voice actor's able to, like, give a different inclination in Vulpes' voice when he's clearly shitting bricks a little bit. Like, he's clearly like, oh, I don't know if my job's going to be around much longer. I might need to peg it, you know? Vulpes thinks he's going to get the sack and has to clean up his CV to look for more work. But I do wonder how many people have actually, like, seen a lot of these lines in-game, because when I made that video, half the comments were like, wow, I didn't even know this happened. I thought, you know, he was just a random character you murdered. Because apparently, most people I've seen who've met Vulpes, they tend to just nuke him where he stands, which is a really interesting, like, thing to consider, because I think it's ideal to not kill him in that first interaction, because I kind of feel like it really affects the tone of the game early on. I guess on, like, your second or third playthrough it doesn't really matter, but I think most people would try to jump, because he's actually quite easy to kill. It's funny because he's like, oh, if you feel so strongly about what we did, why don't you attack us? And all you really need at that point is a handful of mines to kill most of the Legionnaires, and you can kind of get him taken down really easy. It's kind of weird, actually. But also, I found out fairly recently that Vulpes, he comes equipped with a Ripper, but apparently the Ripper is bugged and is basically useless. So what the Ripper's supposed to do is it's a weapon that does a little bit of damage, but it hits like 3 times a second. Now, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to ignore your armor, so it goes straight for your health. But this is coded incorrectly and doesn't work, as many things in New Vegas do. So most of the damage Vulpes does to you is eaten up by your armor, so he's actually really ineffective when you just fight him one-on-one. So he's there talking all the big shit, being like, haha, fuck you, I'm gonna kick your ass. And he basically gets his ass handed to him every time someone plays the game, which is really funny, because, you know, a lot of people don't really know about what he does because of that. Some of the other comments I've got on my other videos actually don't seem to know who he is a lot of the time. They're like, oh, was that guy, like, something important? I had no idea, I just nuked him the first time I saw him. So apparently it is a big thing that just no one really knows who he is because they just kill him instantly, which is sad because I think he's got a lot of lore and I think he's a really interesting character that never gets a lot of play. Something I read about him once, which I don't know if it's true, I don't think it's true, was that he was a cut companion. And I love this idea, but I think the only legit cut companion that I know of is Ulysses, so it would be amazing to have him as a companion, but I don't think he would be. I think the difference between having Ulysses and Vulpes as companions, though, is I think you'd probably be able to talk Ulysses down from Legion stuff. I think you'd probably be able to persuade him that Legion bad come to the good side or whatever, but Vulpes, I think he'd be one of those companions where he's staunchly Legion-centric. I don't think there would be a reality where you could persuade him to not be as Legion. You could maybe persuade him to be nicer, but probably not by much, if you know what I mean. I was about to say maybe he'd be like Boone, where if you've got Boone around Legion people, they're always instantly hostile, but Vulpes, he was supposed to be a spy, so reasonably you'd presume he wouldn't set people off, but we know he's apparently the most quote-unquote famous spy in the Legion, which isn't a great thing when you're a spy. It's like the thing with James Bond, how it's like, everyone knows who the fuck James Bond is, what a fucking spy. But I love the idea that Vulpes would be like Fallout New Vegas' equivalent to Deacon, where he's just got a different outfit for every scenario you're in, where if you're in Legion camp, he's gonna wear Legion garb, but if he's in an NCR camp, he'll probably wear an NCR disguise or something. That'd be, you know, because Deacon's disguises, I don't think they actually mean too much in the grand scheme of things, but considering New Vegas literally has a disguise system that could be more interesting, I think I'd just genuinely be curious to see what Vulpes' opinions would be in way he, like, because it's one of my favorite things about New Vegas when the companions give their opinion on the current scenario. It is one of my favorite things about New Vegas, how all the companions, because they're all so well written, they all have really in-depth responses to everything going on in the wasteland. They don't talk up every time a decision's made, but it's always really interesting to hear what they'll say, because It's strange that they bring new perspectives, and it's really, really interesting because they might bring up something you never thought of. It's like that one scenario where Boone says, hey, we're not doing mercy killings. And it's a nice little bit of foreshadowing to his backstory, because it sounds like generic, oh, I want to be a hero shit initially when he says it, but when you actually get into it, you're like, oh, this means something. One of the things I'm the most sad they cut from the game, which for reasons I understand couldn't be implemented, but they put it into Outer Worlds, which I thought was interesting, was they wanted to be, like, give you the ability to have two humanoid companions, and they'd, like, banter back and forth. I really want to live in the universe where we can see the New Vegas companions bounce off each other, because their relationships, like, between each other would be so fascinating to watch, but it would have been a lot of, like, you know, you would have to voice all those lines, several different interactions for, like, every single, because I'm not sure how the combinations of that would be, but the number would be quite high, and I know they wouldn't want to be dealing with that, but at the same time, two humanoid companions. Imagine you're running around everywhere with Boone and Veronica, just everything would turn to mush the second you looked at it, so, because I think they said game balance was one of the main reasons that they cut this. And Outer Worlds really established why we shouldn't have two companions, because I think there's a bug in Outer Worlds where you can freeze time, but I think it's Parvati's like unaffected by it for some reason, so she's like whacking away at enemies like while everyone's frozen in time, and the other companions can do things, and it's sort of like, oh yeah, you know, maybe we shouldn't have two humanoid companions. They kind of like murder the balance. Even though I think if you could have a party of characters, I don't think any of the New Vegas companions would have very good things to say to Vulpes. You know, I can't imagine Vulpes and Boone being in a party for more than 3 seconds before one of them turned into red paste, so I can't imagine that going down too well. I think it would only be Raoul, Ulysses if he was a Finnish companion, and then maybe Lily. I think everyone else would just hate his guts, so it probably wouldn't work out too well. I'd like to do a video in the future going over what characters I think would make great companions, because I think I could talk for like quite a long time about that, but that'll be interesting. Maybe we can find some other NPCs our favorite furry femboy might be friends with. Member shoutouts time. Thank you to Irrational Sloth, Brandon Ferretti, Tuckett Flane, Thrawn1, Gamera, Commie the Cockroach, Johans, Stephen the King, The Man Who Sold the World, Jacqueline,